Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Braden Kay with the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation and the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program. And you're here for a webinar on our round two of funding infrastructure for extreme heat, where we're featuring extreme heat and related work done by the city of Tempe in Arizona. Thanks all for being here. And then I'm joined on our side by Kelly Meza Prado and Angelo Reyoso from our team. Um, and this really is an opportunity for us to do learning around national best practices around extreme heat as you all are preparing your applications for the second round of our program. All right, next slide. So, in terms of the agenda for today, we'll give a little bit of a background on the Extreme Heat program, an overview of round two. Then we'll go over to the city of Tempe to have them present. We'll be able to have a question and answer session. And then we'll have resources and contact information for us if you need to be in touch with us. This is not a question and answer session about round two itself. We'll be having other sessions, which you can find out about in our newsletter where we'll go into more in depth on the program. This is more of a learning session around extreme heat in general. And today we're obviously featuring learnings from the city of Tempe. Next slide. So with round two, um, we have $27.5 million to grant out. This money is coming both from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and the Prop 4 Climate Bond to fund infrastructure for extreme heat. We have four program values that are driving this work. Harm reduction, which is reducing immediate heat illness, heat death, the impacts of extreme heat. Partnership, which means driving effective solutions that are requiring both community knowledge and implementation capacity. So making sure that you have the partners to do both. Belonging, ensuring that infrastructure is designed with and for the people that use it. And then lasting community benefits, making sure that the investments you're making with these grant dollars are extending beyond just building a thing, but are helping you build way more things in the future to protect citizens and residents in your area. Okay, next slide. So we have two grant types as part of round two. There's early infrastructure, and that's where you're creating a planning document for extreme heat infrastructure. So like a cool corridor master plan. But then you have to have a demonstration project. So in this case, you could do a shade demonstration project that would show the type of shade that you could do as you build out more cool corridors throughout your jurisdiction. Then with the advanced infrastructure type, this is where you're doing a larger infrastructure investment. We are asking you, in addition to that large infrastructure investment, to do a future implementation playbook. So that's policies or designs or guidelines as to how you would build those types of infrastructure in the future. So in this case, it would be a big cool corridor project for like a mile or two in your jurisdiction, as well as a future implementation playbook as to how to guide you building more cool corridors throughout your jurisdiction in the future. Next slide. So, in terms of what's being funded, built environment solutions like shading, cool pavements, uh, cooling, building upgrades, hydration stations, transit shelters. Also, nature-based solutions like urban forestry, green spaces, green stormwater infrastructure, and then also projects that combine both. So in terms of some of the budget requirements and what we're thinking these projects look like, early infrastructure projects are 30-month projects, 750,000 to 1.2 million. 25 to 60% of that budget needs to be on the demonstration project. You have to spend a minimum 8% of your budget on your partnership. So if you're a local government, 8% needs to go to a CBO. If you're a CBO, 8% needs to go to a local government, and then a 4% minimum on your belonging. So if you're hiring an artist or a social worker or a equity consultant or an inclusion consultant, 4% of the budget needs to be spent on that. For advanced infrastructure, these are 48-month projects, $3 to $4.5 million. 70% of your budget needs to be spent on the infrastructure, then 6% on partnerships and 2% on belonging. And then you can spend 15% on indirect costs. We do have a funding priority points system that gives points to severely disadvantaged communities, to tribes, to vulnerable populations, and to disadvantaged communities. And we've had um, sessions that describe the system and how to give us data for this system. So, and we'll continue to have some of those trainings that we will announce via our newsletter. Next slide. And then you heard me describe who can apply. So, as I've mentioned, regional and local public entities are asked to have a CBO or California Native American tribe co-applicant. CBOs are asked to have a local or regional public entity or a tribe as a co-applicant. Public higher academic institutions need to have both a CBO and a local government or tribe. And then we can also have coalitions, but they also need a CBO and a regional public entity or tribe. And then tribes do not require a partnership. Next slide. So in terms of the application process, window one is already closed. Window two, you can still send in a pre-application by August 11th. You will not be able to receive individual TA if you do window two. That was only for window one, but you'll still have sessions where you can um, come to learn about budget, learn how to do the application, learn how to fill out the application and the different sections. So it's just you won't be able to have one-on-one TA from our TA provider. And then the full application is due October 13th. In terms of our timeline, window two closes on August 11th. We will be giving feedback to folks that applied in window two by the week of August 24th. We will be doing office hour sessions and different training sessions throughout August and September. And then we're aiming to have awards announced in early 2027. And then there also will be, for those that are score high enough through our interagency review process, they will be asked to do interviews, hopefully in the December timeframe. Next slide. So I want to get to introduce to you my former colleagues from the city of Tempe in Arizona, Brianne Fisher and Carissa Fowler. They also may have a third colleague, Andy Escobar, who will talk about some of their work as well. You can actually see behind me, I'll duck down. This is a screenshot of the first climate action plan for the city of Tempe that came out in 2019. Tempe was one of the first cities in the country to have an extreme heat section of a climate action plan. Um, and then from there, we did an update to the climate action plan in 2022. Um, and what Chris and Brianne are going to be and Andy are going to be talking about today are various planning projects and work that came out of this work. And so this is all to say a lot of the things that you're going to be seeing come from over a decade of working on these issues and thinking about these issues. So it is pretty sophisticated work that's happening. But what I hope that you can see is if you start with an initial extreme heat action plan, that can then lead into deeper planning processes that can lead to programs and infrastructure getting created. So we're going to have the three folks from the city of Tempe walk through their presentations. I have a few questions for them, and then we'll have an opportunity for anyone in the audience to ask questions as well. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Brianne.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianne Fisher. I am the Sustainability Division Manager. And then Carissa and Andy here with me are actually on our energy team and kind of our mitigation side of the work. That's kind of how we've broken up our division is mitigation work and adaptation work. And so am I sharing screen, Angelo? I'm happy to do that. Or are you sharing screen for
I'm
me?
sharing screen. Are you able to see
Okay.
it?
Um, I am, yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So, when Braden invited us here to talk about some of our work, really what we're going to be talking about today is how we've taken little incremental steps in planning or public support and where we can find the opportunity to build on that for larger action. So that's kind of what we'll be talking about in three different initiatives. Next slide. Those initiatives are our work on urban cooling and greening, our residential energy initiatives, and our resilience hub and microgrid feasibility study, all of which are outlined in that climate action plan update that was approved by council in 2022. So we believe we've got direction and kind of political cover to explore and dive in deeper into these areas. So again, what steps are we taking to position ourselves for future funding or future action? Next slide. And so I'm going to kick us off in talking about our urban cooling and greening efforts, what we call rain to roots. Um, and something that's interesting in all of our different presentations is we start with something. There's always one little thing that we have that we try to build on. And what we had for urban cooling and greening was public support. We hear in every single meeting, in every single planning effort, we need more shade, we need more shade, we need more shade. So we know that that is something that is alive and well and asked for regularly. So with that base, we actually, and I'm going to say we, but really it was Braden Kay, who was our director at the time, also had an opportunity to get a master plan funded. And this was out of conversations with budget and our public works and the team that manages stormwater regulations. There was much more regulations coming down at the federal level, and that team was going to budget and saying, hey, we're going to need to pull more from the general fund. And Braden at the time saw the opportunity to say, wait a minute, green stormwater infrastructure can be a solution for this, and it can increase shade. And we're hearing about that all the time. Fund a study for us to figure out how to do this work. We can mitigate additional costs from the general fund, from meeting these stormwater regulations, and we can increase shade. So we were able to get funding to do this study, and we call it the Rain to Roots Master Plan. It kind of covered three general big areas, kind of reviewing and looking at existing building codes and construction standards, those that might be prohibiting us from doing this work, and some best practices. We explored an urban cooling fee. How can we do this work and cover the stormwater regulations and meet those regulations while also not having our programming, urban cooling and greening infrastructure rely on the general fund, but have a dedicated funding source. And then, of course, looking at project prioritization. If we were to get this funding, how would that be directed? What neighborhoods, what equity criteria, what projects, and where? And then at the same time, there was some existing green infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructures around that we could point to. And that's the pictures you see there. These were projects that were done just kind of, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but not in a strategic way, but done by the streets department, done by the sustainability department, done by just kind of different interested parties throughout the city. So what we wanted to do with Rain to Roots is bring all of that energy and effort in a more strategic way. Next slide. And so one thing that we did kind of as we were getting the Rain to Roots master plan going is just kind of capitalize and get more visible about the work of planting shade. And we were able to use youth and partner with youth and corporate sponsors to have pretty visible planting projects. State Farm, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, those were some of the partners that we had for this work. We planted at schools. We hired photographers, so we would get really nice photos. There was press releases done, just again to position ourselves as the team doing this work and listening. And hey, there's more to come. And hey, there's codes that we need to be changed to continue this work. So I think that was a really big piece of continuing the motivation, continuing the excitement of this work, but kind of low effort, right? We're already doing planting projects. Again, I'm not going to repeat what the master plan covers, but that's kind of what we were able to be working on for a year and a half. And then at the same time, we were able to get capital money. So we have a dedicated budget line item to continue to build green stormwater infrastructure projects. We have been able to do that. We've built two pretty large green stormwater infrastructure projects. We had all of those different teams that were doing it separately come together and work on it on, again, pretty visible sites, the YMCA being one of them. And then we're working on constructing our third one, which is going to be a food forest as well. So we're really bridging water harvesting, a community center working on economic mobility with food and food access and food systems, and bridging the knowledge connection between economic mobility, rainwater harvesting, shade, resilience, and food systems. So that's kind of where we're at with that work. And then I will turn it over to Andy, who's going to be talking about energy.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Andy Escobar, and I'm the Energy Equity Coordinator. As Brian mentioned, my work focuses on residential energy. If you can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. All right, so my work as a coordinator in the office began in 2022 when Braden was able to receive funding from council to fund a few staff positions, as well as a few supplementals to help get our programming going. And so this work began with the one-time supplemental from City Council. It was a small supplemental of around $50,000. And with this project, with this money, we explored two projects. One, a home energy efficiency kit giveaway as phase one, and the development of our residential energy equity roadmap as phase two. And the reason we did two phases with this money was because we've heard from residents that they're tired of having conversations with government staff, asking communities what they need, what they need, and not bringing solutions to them. So through phase one, we handed out 48 home energy efficiency kits. Each kit was valued at around $400, and we included air filters, a smart thermostat, LED bulbs, and utility bill stipends. Knowing and recognizing that these items aren't a long-term solution for energy affordability, but we wanted to give residents something that they can see and hold. Next slide. So with phase two, we asked the same group of residents who received kits to come back for an 8-part workshop series called the Climate Justice Advisory Group to co-create our residential energy equity roadmap, which outlines policy, program, and infrastructure investments to help with energy and extreme heat challenges. We compensated residents with a $25 gift card for every workshop. We provided dinner, childcare. We also provided these workshops in both English and Spanish. So we had a Spanish translator, and we worked with a community-based organization, Rail CDC, for both phases. They already had connections with the community, so we really leaned on them. And then we had an environmental justice advocate from Chispa, Arizona, to help facilitate the workshop in Spanish. I mentioned that we kept working with the same group of residents, and that was mainly driven from our heat priority score map, which you can see on the right. The map shows which areas of Tempe have the highest heat priority based on environmental and socioeconomic factors. And so for these two projects, we worked in the neighborhoods within that yellow oval. Next slide. So while the roadmap was being developed and we were holding these workshops, I was working on the design of a mobile home retrofit program. The funding came from DOE's EECBG grant, and it was money that was already allocated to us, so it was formula funding, and we were allowed to do anything with the money as long as the project was aimed at reducing energy usage, carbon emissions, and increasing energy efficiency. we were able to provide retrofits to 13 homes, and some of the improvements that went into the homes were like sunscreens, LED bulbs, air filters. We did a lot of sealing in the duct work, like air leakage, some insulation. We replaced a lot of HVAC units. I think we even replaced a few refrigerators. And the pictures that you see on the right are taken from one home. I really enjoyed getting to know this household. This is a multi-generational household, so there were grandparents, parents, and children in the home. And what they were experiencing was a really hot home. They had a very aged system, which you can see in the bottom right picture. That AC unit could not function, and there was a lot of air leakage in the ductwork. So even as the HVAC was on and struggling to remain on, it wasn't bringing in a lot of air into the home. So the family was relying on a portable AC unit, which you can see on the left. And but with the program, we were able to entirely replace the HVAC unit with a more efficient one on the right. The family doesn't need to use a portable AC anymore. And so I really like to point to that story about how we've helped people through this program. Next slide. So this is kind of the lens through how I talk about this work and justify the work, and the time and the money that we're spending doing this kind of work. So obviously, households can expect to see energy savings, but this work is also valuable to the larger energy system. Using less energy helps reduce peak electricity demand, which affects rates and affects affordability in the long term. Environmental benefits include a reduction in carbon emissions as well as air pollutants. And at least in Arizona, because of our hot climate, we do view energy efficiency through a public health lens. So our region experiences a lot of heat-related deaths during the high heat months, and having a home with a functioning AC system does save lives. Currently, right now, I'm working on applying for more funding for the mobile home retrofit program, but through philanthropic avenues, since there is a freeze in a lot of federal funding. Continuing to, we're trying to also go into single family with the bit of money that we have from council. So I can always provide updates later on that. And if you want to learn more about my work, my contact info is in the next slide.
All right, perfect. I'll go ahead and go next. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carissa, and I'm here to talk through one of our main highlight actions in our climate action plan update, resilient energy hubs. Next slide, please. So before diving in, I just kind of want to root us again in why this work is important in Tempe. It's been mentioned throughout the presentation, but the Phoenix Valley has seen an increase in climate risks, specifically extreme heat, but also increased storm severity. And in addition to those climate impacts, we're kind of experiencing an interesting time, one where our electricity grid is becoming more vulnerable with the increase in energy use and aging infrastructure. So before I get to the next slide, I just want to do food for thought. So imagine you're living in Tempe. It's 100+ degrees for 3 months straight. What if the power goes out? Power outages during extreme heat are of really high concern for our office. And so, with some city funding, we kind of wanted to explore what backup strategies look like to ensure that essential services across the city can stay operational, even if that power does go down. Next slide, please. So with that funding from City Council, we conducted a microgrid feasibility study, and this study looks at essential locations, both city-owned and community-owned across the city, and what it would look like to back up their essential services with a microgrid, that's solar and battery storage and or generators. And so this study looked at a variety of different things, but looked at the energy efficiency needs of each building. It looked at the solar possibilities in the parking lot specifically because we want shading, and how much battery storage would be needed to back up a resilience area in that building for 24 or 48 hours. And so when we started the procurement process for this study, there was quite a bit of federal funding available for projects like microgrids, and we wanted to be prepared to apply through doing this study. But alas, when the study was complete last year, funding options for implementation have become quite limited. But regardless of funding availability, two really great things have come out of this study. Next slide, please. One being the creation of the Tempe Resilience Hub Network. So, as I'm sure a lot of you know, resilience hubs offer daily programming and can help communities respond and recover to disruptions. So the Tempe Resilience Hub Network is a network of community serving facilities that are community owned, mostly faith-based organizations across the city that come together monthly and individually to work on building the resilience of their community. So this network really has resulted in some really great action in the last couple of years. One thing I want to highlight specifically is in 2025, in October, Tempe got hit with a really big microburst. A microburst is a sudden and aggressive downpour of rain and wind. And this microburst left a lot of people displaced. It left hundreds without power, and there was many, many, many downed trees throughout the city. So the network really stood up during this time and provided essential services to the community. One hub was a backup shelter, another sheltered a national cleanup organization, and another even opened a disaster assistance center in partnership with the city and the county, where residents could go to get support in recovering to the microburst. So it's because of these relationships that have been built through this network that really started with that microgrid study that we live in a Tempe where we're able to respond better to disruptions as a more united front. But during that microburst, it was October, it was in the 70s, it was lovely outside, it was even cloudy. Um, but what if it had been summer when it was 115 degrees? What would have happened to not only the homes, if not only the homes were without power, but also the community center that provided shelter to the displaced? What about the local resilience hub that provided the disaster assistance center? What would have happened to Tempe if this happened in the summertime as opposed to in a time where it was quite nice outside? Next slide, please. So that's why Tempe is continuing our microgrid journey from the start of the microgrid master plan. So we're using the results from the study and we're pursuing a microgrid design for one of our community centers, Escalante. So Escalante has supported in Tempe's disruption response multiple times. They've been a shelter in the past. They were a shelter for the microburst. And they're in one of Tempe's most heat vulnerable neighborhoods, those heat priority scores that Andy mentioned. So they make a really good site operationally and locationally to have a microgrid. And so we are funding this design with city funding, but we do not have any money for construction yet. We're hoping that this design will provide us a shovel-ready project, kind of help us develop a proposal that we can use to pursue implementation funding in the future. And when this implementation does happen, this is going to be our first microgrid, and we're hoping that this pilot can teach us two big things. One being how it can reduce energy use during high demand for the building, and of course, how it can perform during an emergency. So we know that Tempe, power outages during the summertime, it's a concern. We're worried of that coming for us, whether that's in 2 years or 10 years. And we really do want to be prepared with this infrastructure. And so through the work of the Tempe Resilience Hub Network, and because of this microgrid master plan, we feel well equipped to take that next step, which is figuring out what doing an actual pilot can look like. And if you have any questions about this specifically, you can find the microgrid feasibility study report on our website, and my information can be found on the next slide. And then I'll go ahead and pass it to Brianne if you have any final comments for our presentation.
I think we can leave some time for questions. Just a couple notes on the where we're doing a design for the microgrid is in that same neighborhood at the community center that Andy pointed out, where our most heat vulnerable. So that aligns really well. Place-based investment is impactful. And so we are dedicating a lot of resources there. And, sometimes there is a risk. We're putting up money to build a design, knowing we don't have any construction money. However, the microgrid feasibility study was me learning that, oh, there's a lot of federal funding available. We don't have a plan. We don't have a plan that shows here's the priorities of areas you should invest in a microgrid. Here's kind of what those numbers could look like. And so that was really the motivation around investing in the citywide microgrid study. And then Carissa did really good work in building that people relationship and that people infrastructure that paired so well with then the hard infrastructure. And that's why I think I do feel so comfortable in investing in a design for one community center, because we've been able to showcase the social infrastructure and get clear on what we want out of that design. And so I believe the investment in both of those things can result in a pretty appealing grant application or fundraising opportunity for the Escalante microgrid construction. That's all I'll add. And then we can answer some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the three of you. Just really appreciate all of the work you've done and taking the time to tell your story. Um, One thing I want to say about our grant program, and some of this is coming out of both Kelly and my experience in Tempe, Kelly's experience in Minnesota and internationally, is that to exactly Brianne's point, is you need to be able to bring these concepts to enough specificity that someone's willing to fund them. So in our early grant program, we're going to allow you to do planning up to 15% design of an infrastructure project so that you know how big the design is, what the general components are, so that you can go out and get more funding for it. And then the whole idea in the advanced infrastructure category in terms of that playbook is to be able to develop guidelines, have a general sense of where you want to prioritize investment. And so, whether it's Andy's equity roadmap that she described to you, that would be an appropriate thing to fund in as a playbook idea for an advanced project. Carissa's microgrid study could be an appropriate thing to do. So that's one element. And then the other element is the importance of pilot projects. And I think all three of you talked about that. Andy with the mobile home pilots, Carissa with working on this microgrid pilot, Brianne talking about the importance of pilot projects in terms of developing support for rain to roots, and that's why we have a requirement that you have to have a demonstration project in your early project. In our first round, you could have a $750,000 planning project and not have a demonstration project. And we didn't want to do that anymore because we know the power of demonstration projects. And Tempe, is an amazing example of the power of how those demonstration projects can help you learn how to do the work. They can help you develop social infrastructure, people and champions that want more of that work to be happening, and they can go to your city council or your county supervisors to advocate for more funding and resources. So those are really powerful. We have a question here, Andy, from an anonymous attendee. What advice do you have for jurisdictions interested in working with mobile home residents to provide improvements to protect them from climate hazards? And I do know that when Andy and I were working together with Brianne on this initial project, It took Andy a lot of time of listening, trying to figure out the appropriate partners to go into these mobile home communities with. Do you want to talk a little bit about that early stage work and sort of how you developed the relationships and the learning necessary to develop the pilot program? It did not happen overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if I'll be able to answer that because I think, I ask myself these questions still today. So the work started by uh, obviously the grant, and I chose mobile homes because from research that Arizona State University had done, Braden connected me to a great professor over there, Patricia Solis, who I'm still in contact with these days. And she had worked with the county and a few CBOs to research the disproportionate reality that mobile home residents face in Arizona. They were able to find through heat-related death reports from the county that about 40% of indoor heat-related deaths occur in mobile homes, even though they make up only 5% of the housing stock in the county. Um, and so that really made me focus on mobile homes. How I was able to connect with residents were through several different avenues. First, it was Patricia Solis at ASU, who had connections with the Arizona Association of Mobile Home Owners. So this is a group of people, that regular folks that live in mobile home parks, who have an association, and they help each other with the legal issues that they face from their park management companies, and they have a network across the state. And so I connected with them. I learned about some of the realities that they face as residents, not just as people who are trying to afford their energy bills month to month and other necessities, but like, what is it like to own your home but not own the land that you're on, and all of the laws or regulations that they have to follow from private companies. And then I also went directly to the park management companies, and I either went in person or called them on the phone, and learned about the characteristics of the mobile home park, how many homes there were, if they're a homeowner or they allow subleasing, they're on a master meter system. So just learning as much as you can about mobile homes and how they differ from each other just in one city. And then obviously the last piece was working with the CBO, Unlimited Potential, who went almost, not, I wouldn't say door to door, but they have their own network. They know a lot of community members in Tempe, and they were able to promote the program by word of mouth. I already forgot what the question was.
Oh, yeah, any other advice you have in terms of how to start this mobile home
Uh,
uh, retrofit work?
Yeah, I basically just do a lot of research. Like I said, like learn who the players are, whether it's CBO, an association, and kind of also try to learn about some of the policies or rules that pertain to mobile home parks because they are such a unique community.
And one thing I just want to add is that I think that the energy home kit giveaway and our recognition of like, okay, let's not go back to the community and keep asking for what they need and what they want. I think our recognition of that did us really good. We said, hey, here's a gift, right? Here's a freebie for you. Like, thanks for already giving us some of your time and attention, in the climate action plan. And so I think that that was really a helpful starting place, and it didn't cost us too much money. And just being able to piggyback on that same community that was clearly interested enough to get air filters and some of these low cost solutions. And then in Andy's work through the workshops, it was really more educating the public on what energy policies and programs exist. I think we learned that pretty quickly too, is that we weren't going to have great engagement of what they want to see because they didn't even know. So there was a lot of educating and like peer understanding and learning the processes and the programs that exist, and then a little bit smaller engagement touch points than I think we originally expected, just because there was a need for a learning gap. So I would say to get started, but you don't have to know everything before you get started. We were kind of learning alongside the community in what the energy regulations or what those programs are. And, there's some requirements that some people aren't eligible. Well, why aren't they eligible? Well, we found out during our research it was because of this, right? And that's a limitation. So it's okay to learn alongside your residents. And
Yeah,
energy is a difficult topic, so they're not going to know a lot.
yeah, and I think, Brian, it's such a good point. I think really thinking about these processes as continuous learning processes that you're doing, whether it's a CBO doing with their local government or a local government doing with their partners, and thinking about it as continuous learning makes a lot of sense. We have two questions from Antonio. Um, One is I'm going to do a second one first because I think it's really important with Rain to Roots. One of the things that I remember very clearly was having several people in the public works department tell me, like, you need to present this stuff to us like every month. Like, we need to like learn with you about like what are curb cuts, what are bioswales, what is urban forestry, like how do you take care of trees? Like, do you want to talk a little bit? One thing that we all did together is we got in a van and we went down to Tucson to go see their Storm to Shade program with like 15 folks from five different departments. Do you want to talk a little bit about both learning that needs to happen within your own government with various departments, and then also how you educate council and city council staff? We brought city council staff to that tour in Tucson as well. Now one of those staff members is actually a city council member. So, so do you
That
want to
worked
talk
out
a
in
little?
our favor.
Yeah, it did, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the continuous learning process with multiple departments in a project like Rain to Roots, and then also how you're bringing your elected officials and their staff along in the process?
Yeah, and I really think about like education also just being like cultural change, right? Like it takes a long time and it takes repeated statements. Like, but if I said to any council member, "Oh, Rain to Roots," they would know what we mean by that. And that's huge. Would they fully understand every element of it? No, we don't expect them to. But if we said range roots, they would understand we need water capture and more trees and removing of hardscape. Like they would know those three elements. And that probably took a year and a half to do. But again, as Braden mentioned, from everything from taking a large coalition down to Tucson and a neighboring community where they're doing this work advanced of us and being able to ask questions. And we had our water engineer there who was poking and prodding, and we had those that were doing regulations on stormwater, and people from the mayor and council office there. So it was a wide coalition of folks, and you're able to just chat through it and ask questions about how they manage that at lunch before the next stop. So that was really impactful. And then again, I think a message that is quick and easy to understand. Our current director, I feel like, has done a very good job of just repeating range roots, range roots. That's range roots. Oh, that's a flooding issue. Range roots could fix something like that. He repeated that in his directors' meetings often. We have done a bike tour where, as part of our programming for Rain to Roots, we did have a Rain to Roots ambassador program. So monthly, we would meet with these folks. And at one point, we did a bike tour where we stopped by the existing projects that they could see, and we could talk through, good design and bad design. Here's where that didn't work the way we intended it to. So that's been impactful too. I think anytime you can see it, it just helps connect. We did a tour of YMCA before it was constructed and then after it was constructed. So people could see we're going to put a basin there and we believe it's going to collect this much water. And then post construction, there's the basin we talked about, and look at all the water it collected. So that I think it's a lot of repeating the message, trying to continue to get people on board every single day, even though it's not their main point of focus, and building a culture around it. Was it again a year and a half, 2 year effort.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear this from all three of you because I know that each of you have done a lot of collective learning. Antonio asked, how long does it take to develop these plans? Do you all want to talk about with each of your plans, the consultant you worked with, and like one or two lessons learned that you have from like working with consultants and doing these plans? So many folks on the call here are going to end up hiring consultants to help them create these plans or create these playbooks. And just want to remind them that you basically, for each of these plans, hired a consultant for the roadmap, for the energy roadmap, for the microgrid master plan. So maybe each of you could speak a little bit uh, to that. And then after we do that, I'm also going to ask you about CBO partnerships. But let's start with consultants first.
Carissa, do you want to go first and then Andy?
Yeah, of course. So I worked with, oh goodness, three consultants as part of the microgrid feasibility study. We worked with one directly who was kind of PMing the project, managing the entire project, and then working with um, two kind of electrical um, focused companies. And so we worked with Quest Energy, was the big one that we worked with, and RSP Consultants. And then Quest kind of brought on another consultant around kind of sizing the solar and battery systems for each site. And so the study took quite a while. I started the study. We had just we had finished the RFP, and we entered kind of interviews for the consultants when I first started, which was September 2023. And the study just finished up at the end of last year. So the whole study took a good chunk of time. It took about a year and a half, 2 years, just because, there was 27 sites as part of the study. We had to visit each site, kind of get their operations down, and, looking at their buildings for energy efficiency and then sizing the systems. And so there was a lot of moving parts for this study. And I think that was something that was throughout the study, it kind of became a little difficult with all the different parties. But also each party contributed a really key component. One was focused on sizing the solar and battery system. The other was focused on project managing. The Quest Energy was focused on kind of helping size and do energy efficiency recommendations. And so working with the three consultants was definitely an interesting process, but each one was essential to this now amazing study that we can take to the next step. But not only, the study, but also after, there was the presenting to the different departments and the community-based organizations that were a part of the study, and kind of providing them a little bit of technical support of understanding what the study says, because solar energy, it's not something that's easily digestible. And so making sure that we were sitting down after the study with the consultants and the different sites, just to make sure that there was an understanding of how they could move this forward. Hopefully that answered the question a bit.
Yeah, and it's helpful. And I remember like writing some of the RFPs and making sure you're going to do a presentation to each council member. You're going to present to the whole council 3 times through the course of the project. Like really writing into your scope of works so many opportunities for education, for communicating about the plan, making sure that you're overestimating the number of hours for community engagement activities. There's a lot you can do to manage those consultants to make sure they're not just doing the work, but they're also helping you communicate about the work. Andy, anything you want to add from your experience?
I would say I had a pretty similar experience to Carissa in terms of timeline. It took about a year and a half to get this roadmap, one developed and then approved by council. And then I didn't work with a consultant on this. I was the PM on this, and then I collaborated with a CBO on this, which I know you have questions about that later. Um, I think I also had a the I also had to go through the process of taking the roadmap to council, but before then, I had to after we wrapped up the 8 workshops, I had to do a public survey for the whole city. And then I had to do 2 public meetings, like general public meetings, and then taking the material to our sustainability commission. And um, because through those presentations, you don't, as Brienne mentioned, you don't have that co-learning with those public members that you're engaging with after the fact that you've developed the roadmap. Um, People tend to have, different opinions and then about the needs of the community without having that background context of those 8 workshops and those conversations and deep diving into policies and regulations and how the utilities work. So that was a little bit difficult. It was because I didn't have that time to sit down with the general public on this or with our commission. And then so making sure that those that feedback is incorporated into the roadmap, but making sure that the voice of the residents who you worked with for 8 months are still kind of the ones kind of leading this work. You're
Thank you,
muted.
Andy. Brianne, any top level advice about consultants coming out of
Yeah,
Rain to Roots?
I I would say that in general, be strategic on where you want your consultant because sometimes I get frustrated with consultants because I feel like it's almost just as much work to manage them as it is to just do the work. So I would suggest before you draft up your scope of work, before you do your RFP, before you enter into a contract, think slow down and think about what skills do you have? What skills and capacity do you have on your team? What relationships do you have? Where are the gaps? For microgrid, we didn't have all of the technical expertise, but Carissa probably could have PM'd the study like Andy did. Um, but we didn't have the professional expertise of the analytics of the solar of all of that stuff. Um, we didn't have relationships with the community for Andy's work. And so we went with a CBO on that, right? That made sense for us. So I would say really brainstorm where you need that skill gap and cater it towards that. Having a general contractor can be difficult and be just as much time and get really, really clear on what end goal looks like. That would be my suggestion. Those would be some lessons learned. One of the best things on the Rain to Roots is that we had a subcontractor who was building projects with us and helping do the master plan. It was a landscape architect, and they're still phenomenal and helping us think through these things. So they were seeing the challenges and also saying, okay, let's write this into the plan. So that was really helpful on Range Roots.
Awesome. Well, I know we have a limited amount of time, but I'd love to hear just a few highlights from CBO partnerships and what you've been learning. We did an original CBO partnership in 2022, or we did some CBO partnerships in 2022 to create the extreme heat or the update to the climate action plan, and then you all used partnerships with a lot of your plans. So, any lessons learned there or things that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, community-based organizations are phenomenal at what they do. And again, assess what their strengths and their weaknesses are. Not every CBO is great at everything, and their funding ebbs and flows. So have real, honest conversations on what their strengths and what they can bring to the table are. Again, Rail CDC, one of our very often used community-based organization, has phenomenal relationships with the community, right? And they'll text them and they'll say, hey, are you guys coming? Hey, don't forget your 25 bucks. We were actually able to get away from some legal issues of paying them to participate through the CBO. So sometimes the CBO is just a great pass through of being able to be creative on how to incentivize the public to get there. Um, Andy, do you want to talk maybe about unlimited potential and your experience with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've worked with both Rail CDC and Unlimited Potential, and even though they're two CBOs, they function very differently. So Rail CDC is really great at, as Brienne mentioned, connecting you to community members, and they really do feel. I feel that community members really do feel like they're a part of their community. They hire, I believe they exclusively hire from the neighborhoods that they work in. And so not only do they help connect cities or, other entities to the community, but they're also, create jobs for them in different projects. Unlimited Potential, I worked with them on the mobile home retrofit program, and they're really good at project managing. They were able to pretty much single-handedly get the word out about the program and sign people up. And because they also know several community members, a lot of households heard about the program through them instead of through city channels. So CBOs are also a really great way to use different communications channels, because we know that not everybody really follows the city on social media or newsletters or checks the city website. And then both CBOs, they have bilingual staff, so we're also able to reach a wide variety of residents.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to the three of you and sharing what you have. You also shared your email addresses for folks that want to do any follow-up, and good luck continuing to do the work. For I think one thing just to tell everyone is like you don't get things done unless you put them on paper and ask for them. So Carissa's position, Andy's position, even Brienne's position, I wrote the budget supplementals for those. Many of the things that you heard were just ideas that I put into a budget supplemental. Oh, we should have an energy equity roadmap. Oh, we should have a microgrid feasibility study. I, at one point, one budget year, had 30 budget requests. And some of those requests didn't get funded until 3 or 4 years later. But because the writing was there, because the thing had already been submitted, eventually those things did get funded. And so really using these planning opportunities to put in a bunch of budget supplementals into your city council or county government, and great things can happen and careers can blossom out of that work. And real, community change is really possible if you get those budget supplementals in, and if you use grant dollars like our own to convince your government to spend more money on this work. It's all can be possible, and Tempe is an amazing example of that. So in terms of us, we're going to hear from our colleagues. One of our former City of Tempe colleagues is now the local food manager in Phoenix, and she's going to be presenting with the Chief Heat Officer, Dave Hondula, on Thursday. So we'll be hearing from them on the 30th. And then some collaborators from the City of Tempe, the HECU Art Continuum, are going to be presenting on work that they did with Brienne and the team around incorporating indigenous knowledge into the future of Tempe. And then we'll also continuing to have office hours, including one on funding priority points on August 10th. Thanks so much for all being here, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Thanks,
Thank
Tempe.
you. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.